We are live. Hello. So this is our 2:15 session, and with us we have Denny Sargent. He's a presenter from Seattle Pacific University. He's the author of Werewolf Magick and a number of other kick-ass books. When I first interviewed Denny, he sent me a copy of the book, and I gotta say, Denny, I'm like, what? And then I read it, and I totally knew where he was going, and it was awesome. So I will let Denny speak. I am going to be kind of invisible, and I'm going to be sharing some slides at the same time. So, Denny, you go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Denny Sargent. When I present on Werewolf Magick, I like to start with a good friendly, "Arr!" So, how are you? I am academic, but I'm a kind of a wacko academic, so just you're going to have to bear with me. This is the book that sort of started it all for me. It sounds ridiculous and insane. It actually is grounded in lots and lots of research. There have been werewolf cults from the beginning of time. The earliest werewolf image I have found is in a prehistoric cave painting. Is 40,000 years old. I'm going to talk very briefly about it. I have a short amount of time. I can easily fill up 3 hours, so it's going to go fairly fast. The one thing I do want you to know is if you want to contact me, my name is Denny Sargent. You can find me on Facebook under Denny Sargent. You can friend me if you like. Also, I have an author page on Facebook, DennySargentAuthor.com. Excuse me, Denny Sargent Author. I'm on Instagram as Denny Sargent Author. And I have a website, and that is the most important thing because all the notes from this conference are going to be on my blog, which is on my website. If I don't get to everything that I want to get to today, you can find it there because I'm a college teacher and I have to provide my notes. That is werewolfmagick.com, and I'll type it in the bar here, WEREWOLF Magick MAGICK.com. If you go to that page, you will find the notes from this conference. Much fuller notes probably because I have a lot to say and a little time to say it. So here we go. I would like to talk to you first about werewolf fetches and werewolves. Let's talk, before I go any further, let me just explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why werewolves? More than a third of witches tried in medieval Europe were also accused of being werewolves. This is a werewolf fetch, by the way. This is obviously a very old engraving. So the idea that witches had familiars or fetches, some were rabbits, some were cats. Very few people realize a lot of them were wolves or werewolves. And in fact, over a third of witches were accused of werewolfery, i.e. being werewolves. So in tandem with the witch trials, there were also many trials for this almost the same group of people for being werewolves. Let's take a look at the picture of the werewolf trial. I think that's the next one coming up. But the werewolf trial, there we go. And this is like a really difficult to see, but if you look around it, you'll see all these werewolves killing lots and lots of people or having a good time, depending on your point of view, if you're a werewolf, right? And then in the middle are all the people being burned alive for, you can see over to the left, they're going to the Sabbath. Above here, they're turning into werewolves. If you go clockwise, they're still being werewolves and killing lots of people. There's more werewolves killing people, and then they get caught and they're in trial. So from the beginning, the werewolf, I guess we could call it a disaster that swept through Europe when the church decided that anyone even slightly pagan had to be put to death and accused of sorcery and witchcraft. Everything was connected with werewolves, which I didn't realize till I started doing research. So a lot of witches are werewolves, and a lot of witches, I hope, still are werewolves, but it's a whole different ballgame. Let's talk a little bit about what we're talking about. And of course, we're talking about shapeshifting. There's a lot to be said. What enters Europe through lots of different cultural streams, ancient Rome, indigenous Celtic and other practices, the Greek shape-shifting traditions. There were werewolf cults throughout history, but it all came into Europe and hidden and bubbled, and these pagan survivals very likely had somewhat shamanic shape-shifting practices. And this is what my book, Werewolf Magick, is all about. I have to gratuitous flash of my book one more time. So let's talk about the double. Let's go to the next picture. And I want to talk about like this man, Claude Lycanthropy, I believe, I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Shapeshifters and Astral Doubles in the Middle Ages. This is the book that tied a lot of my book together. I had a bunch of research going, and by the way, I never planned to write this book. This was all about a personal gnosis I was going through. I was going through a complete disaster in my life, lost everything. And I meditate every night, and I do practices every night. And this werewolf spirit showed us, this wolf spirit showed up, a three-eyed wolf, and started showing me that this was a magical path that I was already hooked into through myself being an initiated witch. And it led me, this meditative creature, this archetype, led me through the research. And I had all these pieces, but I didn't have the main piece that I needed, and this book gave it to me. I highly recommend it. And I want to talk very briefly about the double, because he brings it up. The double is a separate spiritual entity from our soul, recognized by ancient and current cultures. Sometimes called the astral or etheric body, is an energetic part of each of us that can, with practice, do things like manipulate energy or even independently travel out of body, re-astral spiritual worlds, right? So like, for example, many cultures, including, this comes from the ancient Greeks, and this book tells you exactly where it came from, but it was older. Ancient Egypt, they had the Ba and the Ka. I believe it was Plato was the one who was written down. Herodotus talks about it too, that we have different souls. We have an eternal soul, but then we have this astral body that can be manipulated and used and projected. This is the key to shape-shifting. So the double can be strengthened with magic and reformed into any aspect the person wills through a focus on magic. In our case, that of a wolf or a werewolf. Why wolf? Why werewolf? Because it is the alpha predator in all of Europe, in Northern Europe, in the Scandinavian countries, in most of where our culture came from. Greece, when lions were gone long before wolves, took a long time before they went. Rome was founded by a sacred wolf goddess, Lupa. The biggest festival, as I'll tell you later, was Lupercalia, the wolf festival. The priests were called Luperci, which means werewolves. So we have to get out of this trope of, werewolves are on show up in Halloween or on horror movies. Werewolves were taken extremely seriously in the ancient world and were seen mostly as warriors or important sorcerers. This is in Celtic and in Norse cultures, and in Rome and in Greek. A lot of the information I have in Werewolf Magick about the history of the werewolf cults traces back all over the place. Now you go to other countries, for example, Morocco, where the main alpha predator is a hyena, and you find were hyenas and entire mythologies and entire clans that still claim to be were hyenas. We can go on and on. The reality is that witchcraft and a lot of what we call craft or paganism was rooted far, far back in animism. And it still is rooted in animism. Animism and shape-shifting and shamanic cultures that I have visited. I have interviewed shamans from Ulchi shamans from Siberia. I've interviewed shamans from Guatemala. The techniques that they're using, the shape-shifting that they're doing, the ethnogens that they use are all exactly the same. And this is probably what was going on in the Middle Ages. So moving right along. The double is the key to shape-shifting, as explained in my book. The double can thus be evoked, empowered, shaped, and projected outward. This is the origin of shape-shifting and of people seeing werewolves. Now, my book does not go that far. I lead people through changes and ways to shapeshift, but shapeshift in their own body. There is a way to project that into the double and send it out and go into a coma, which is what all the stories we have from ancient Greece and Rome and Celtic sources that I could find, and the witchcraft trials. All of these have the same MO, which is the witch projects out, turns into a wolf, leaves, but their body stays there comatose, hidden, and in many cases, in some trial documents, protected by the head of the coven, who is known as the dark man or the devil. We know who he is, right? So the horn god himself. In the werewolf cults that I'm trying to work with and revive, I use the god of the werewolves from Lupercalia, who is Faunus. Faunus is the Roman Pan, but he is also the werewolf god. And I will leave that there for you to think about and explore. So the double can be a vehicle for our consciousness as a separate linked entity. And it was and can be shapeshift into a wolf. In my book, I don't encourage people to leave their body comatose and try to move it forward. Besides, it takes many years of intense practice and mentoring. But I do mention it at the back of the book. I have a theoretical ritual that people used in the Middle Ages to actually project out of their body as werewolves. One of the things we know for a fact, because it shows up in Greek, Roman, and in the witchcraft trial documents, is that when someone does turn into a werewolf, when a werewolf is spotted and someone shoots it or stabs it, they go back and they can find the person guilty because they're lying in their bed with the same wound. In the sagas, the Norse, of course, are very, very involved in werewolfism. I'm sure all of you have heard of berserkers. There were berserkers, bersark, which means bear shapeshifters, but there were just as popular ulfsark. Ulfsark were werewolf shifters. Many of the most popular famous rulers or warriors that are mentioned in the sagas have Ulf in front of their name. If they have Ulf in front of their name, they are sorcerer shapeshifters and berserkers who put on, in the Norse, they put on the skin of the wolf and they become that spirit. So all of this kind of wove down into medieval witchcraft in bits and pieces, or witch cults, or whatever you want to call it, pagan survivals. So let's talk about fetches and what the Norse called the Flygia. Okay, it's exactly the same. So we can often see witches riding a wolf spirit or fetch to the Sabbat. Could I have the next picture? And this is a Norse Flygia. So this is what the fetch looks like in Norse magic. It is in the form of a wolf. It can be in the form of a werewolf too. I think I was amazingly happy to find this image that somebody actually wrote this. This is my Flygia. So there are still many people who practice Norse traditions. There's the Asatru people. Most Asatru people I know have nothing to do with right-wing causes. They are truly believing in what they're doing. But there is a long tradition of sorcery in Asatru, which is often called, they call it Seder is one way of looking or talking about it. But the idea of a flegia or a familiar is part of wearing the wolf skin. You can become the wolf or you can project the wolf. This is sort of the basic thesis of everything I'm going to say today. Once you learn how to take your double and project it, it can also become a separate entity if you feed it. So I'm following this exact same thread through several cultures, and then in the witchcraft trials, which are horrible, and I spent many months reading them, but buried in them is verification that this is in fact what quote unquote witches were doing. So the fetch of Flygia could, Flygia, I cannot pronounce it right, could be sent out to do things. Curse cows and to steal milk would seem to be one of the favorite things in the witchcraft trial documents, or used as a helper or vehicle to go to the witch's Sabbath. Can I go to the next? Can I go to the next one? So this, again, all of you know, I'm sure, some of the witchcraft trial documents and some of what they said. Often witches would rub a salve on themselves and then fly to the Sabbath. Well, this is in Greek, by the way. Herodotus talks about the exact same thing. Petronius talks about the exact same thing in ancient Rome. The Lupercalia, they ingested something and rubbed something on their body. We know they're ethnogens. We don't know exactly what they were, whether they're psilocybin or amanita or whatever. A lot of the formulas in the witchcraft child documents are horrible and poisonous, with henbane and wolfbane and stuff that would either get you high or kill you. But the bottom line is they use some sort of trigger, plus very likely rhythm, just like studying and talking to real shamans from Siberia, rhythm and Guatemala, rhythm, trance states, meditation, fasting, putting themselves in like a witch's cradle, so getting sort of covering their senses, and sort of all these sorts of techniques of altered states were used to release their double. Now, this took a lot of practice. You had to really invest in shaping your double into a specific form. It could be a rabbit, it can be a cat. Many times it was a wolf. So here's an image of a wolf flying to the Sabbath on her familiar, which is a wolf. Now, the wolf could be a werewolf, or it could be a wolf, but it is her spirit familiar. So, okay, can we move to the next one? By the way, what I was saying. Okay, we'll talk about fetch creation. Here's another witch riding the wolf to the Sabbath or to somewhere. So witches could also use their wolf familiars to do far seeing, meaning, and this is sort of an image that comes to mind in terms of going into a trance, riding the wolf familiar to another place, to instead of just to the Sabbath, but to see something, or to project energy somewhere, or to go somewhere and heal someone. Having this energetic vehicle takes you there, and then you can focus in your sort of human form while this other part of you is taking you there and helping you. I'm hoping this makes a certain amount of sense. Anyway, let's go to the next picture. So fetch creation. Oh, this is a great image of a witch turning into a werewolf. Just in case you didn't believe me, that most witches were accused, a large majority, between a third and over a half, were accused of werewolfism as well as being witches. You know, the linchpin that clicks them together is that, of course, Satan. It's always Satan. Satan gave them the power to shapeshift, gave the head of the coven the spell, the wolf belts, and told the head of the coven, okay, here's the formula for rubbing this horrible stuff all over you to get you high. And but also imps, familiars, and especially wolfish or werewolf familiars were, of course, sent by Satan as presents, pets. Like you buy a dog for somebody for Christmas, Satan gives you a werewolf. Nice. It's a good perk. It's a good perk for being a witch in the Middle Ages. Oh, I got a werewolf for Yule, you know. Anyway, I love this image just because, I mean, in case there's any question about what's going on here, that is a witch turning into a werewolf. And a very apparently erudite and well-dressed werewolf too. Can I go to the next one? So I'm going to talk about fetch creation now.
There isn't a next one.
Oh, that's it. That was the last one. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. That's all the images I think I probably need. I just wanted to sort of make it look, give you something to look at other than my face, which is not quite as wolfy as I would like it to be. So let's talk about fetch creation through animistic, or you could even say shamanic exercises, likely left over from indigenous shamanic practices, as well as classical pagan magical survivals, the witch called upon the lord of the forest. Often in these witchcraft dialogue documents, they talk about the black man, the dark man, or the lord of the forest. I call him Faunus, Pan, and Cernunnos. You call him whatever you want. Who was the devil? They also called him the devil, and even some covens today they refer to him as the devil. So then they call upon the lord of the forest, they call upon the primal goddess, and often the moon, whether it's Diana or Aradia, or in older times it was Hecate or Hecate, depending on how you pronounce it, and Artemis and Selene. In my book Werewolf Magick, I use Lord of the Forest, Gaia, and Artemis for new moon, Selene for full moon, and Hecate for dark moon, but they are all referred to as the moon mothers. This is all stuff that came to me through the werewolf gnosis as I actually started running into the woods, ripping off my clothes and howling like a maniac and coming back and writing rituals. So everything in this book is stuff I've done. I have not been arrested yet. Probably have scared my neighbors. I just found out actually, because I have a little house now with a bunch of woods behind me. And every full moon, I go out and I do my werewolf magic, which is generally unclad, generally loud, and I shapeshift, which means I go completely nuts, and I have a great time. I'm in the middle of Seattle. I keep expecting the police to show up. They've never showed up. So the neighbors, I don't know. One of my neighbors came over and said, "Hey, do you hear we have coyotes?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, really? I haven't seen coyotes around here. I had coyotes where I lived, down south, but I didn't know there was any coyotes here. Are cats missing?" And, "Yeah, it seems like they come around every full moon." I go, "Oh, so apparently I'm a coyote now." Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about this. So there's images of witches writing fetches, and fetches can be sent out they can be sent out to help as well, of course. Anyway, fetch creation through animistic exercise. They're taught usually by the head of the coven or somewhere. In ancient Greece and Rome, it was by the people, the magicians who lived in the who worked, or the priests and priestesses in the various temples. So, for example, the temple in Rome, the temple of Lupa, the wolf goddess, was where the Lupercalia was held, and a number of wolf gods are ascribed to the Lupercalia, which later became apparently St. Valentine's Day, which I think is probably the funniest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, so Lupercalia was a 4-day all-out orgy in Rome around the beginning of mid-February, and the Luperci, the werewolf priests, would all assemble with the priests of the temples of the wolf god, down in a cave underneath the temple of Lupa and other things. And they would sacrifice a dog, which is interesting because it's the only Roman festival noted where a dog was actually sacrificed. And the research indicates it was probably originally a wolf. So they would sacrifice a dog, but then they would kill a goat, strip its skin off, and the Luperci priests would then go through a ritual of turning into werewolves, ripping off their clothes and all this stuff. And then they would wear, for a little bit of modesty, they'd wear some of the bloody goat skin around their loins, and they would take strips of the goat skin. And they would then become the Luperci. They would be anointed with goat milk and with blood. And then they would go out, and everyone in Rome at that point was drunk, and there was massive fornication around. And they would go around whipping people who wanted fertility, mostly women, but I'm sure at least a few guys went out there like, "Yeah, I want that too." And so they would go around whipping them with these thongs to give them fertility. And this went on for 4 days. Even the Roman city fathers tried desperately to put a handle on this festival. Forget it. They just went out of town and let it go. When the church took over, they tried desperately to stop Lupercalia. They could not. There were still 4 days of orgies and drunkenness. And they eventually replaced it with the Festival of the Virgin Mary, which I don't think went very well for them. And apparently St. Valentine's Day, which really didn't exist before that, ended up there. So anyway, some ancient history is awesome because of the great dirt and stories. So let's talk a little bit more about fetch creation. So craft was employed to raise the energy and send forth the double by means of psychoactive substances, as we've talked about. Oh, witch cradles, I didn't mention. That's another way to enter altered state and leave your body. So periodically, the fetch had to be fed because your astral body is an energetic body, and it means that you're generating it from your own being, right? And when you die, like in ancient Egyptian mythology and in a lot of other mythologies, when you die, your spirit leaves, but your etheric body, your energetic body, your ba, continues for a period of time. If people feed it, it will continue and become a separate entity, like a shade, they used to call it, right? So that can be formed and set in the form of a werewolf, of course, in magic. So you have to feed the fetch regularly. And we know this from the witchcraft trials, that people who were found to have marks were immediately accused of witchcraft because that's where their familiar fed, right? So this probably indicates that fetches, or the etheric body, there was a core of deeply occult knowledge held by some of these people, that by feeding their etheric body after they had formed it into the form of a wolf, then they could make it more robust, more powerful. It became stronger. It was able to take them to the Sabbath, or was able to go and do things, which makes perfect sense. We know these things all make sense. So once up and running, the fetch can be called upon for any astral work. Now, I have an entire section in my book on fetch work. And it sounds weird, but I actually teach people, this is how you do it. One of the things that you should probably do if you're actually going to go this route and create a fetch is have a shrine for it, have a place for it to live. There's indications that witches had a certain object or place where their familiar lived. And this makes sense because in a lot of ancient cultures, again, I can go on and on, but I don't have a lot of time. But in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, in the Nordic countries, in the Celtic countries, there was always shrines for these familiar spirits. Animism makes more sense in many ways than anything else. And if you go into the pagan world, there were gods, there were pantheons, but there were always lots of spirits. I spent a lot of time working and studying Tantra. And in Tantra, there are the gods, Shiva, Kali, Parvati, etc. But there are many, many, many spirits. And so, for example, the Naga, which I wrote a book about, are these spirits, and I couldn't figure out what they were because they show up all the time in these tantric texts, but they're like familiar spirits. They're like elves. So anywhere we go, we see the substrata of spirits. Fetches fall into that subset. So it makes sense that you would have a place, like many of you, I'm sure, have little shrines to different, your garden deity, like I do, or different things. I have a werewolf shrine, which I'm not going to show you because it'll scare the pants off you, but it's on my website if you want to see it. Anyway, you should have a place for your fetch to live if possible. And that's where you feed it. That's where you talk to it. That's where you work with it. It's a good psychological, whether you think of it as an archetypal force that you're creating from your animal self, or it's a separate entity that you're just working with. However you view it, you want to have a place for that. That kind of leads me to talking about the animal self, which is a key part of my book. So in the pagan world, we were considered animals. And in the shamanic world, having talked to a number of different shamans and I've traveled to about 30 countries, I've hung out with these people. We are part of the ecosystem. We are animals. There's the great spirit, however you want to call it. There's this great spiritual entity or experience. And then there's us and the animals. And then there's the Earth Mother and, the Sky Father, the Sun, the Moon, all that. But we are part of the animal kingdom. And therefore, the animals can talk to us. If you talk to Native Americans, if you talk to a lot of people in tribal cultures, they will tell you, we learned everything that we needed to learn from the animal spirits. The shamans I interviewed from Siberia, they knew they were shamans when they were 3 or 4 years old because the animal spirits came and talked to them. And as my friend who I got to know, who is a top shaman for the Olchi, Nadiajda, I talk about her in Werewolf Magick, in my book Werewolf Magick, and I also I have a link to an interview I did with her because she was hilarious and she was really powerful. But her view of this sort of syncs with the medieval witchcraft idea, which is why I want to talk about it. So she knew when she was 4, she woke up in the middle of the night and woke up her parents and said, the animal spirits are talking to me. I don't know what to do. And her parents started crying. They started crying as they said, oh my God, it means you're a shaman. Now, let's talk about this. The American view of shaman is like you go to an institute and you get a certificate and, oh, I'm a shaman. No, that's not true. Shaman actually is a term that's specifically for Siberian shamanism and animism. We use the term shamanic, it's just bled into everything. But having talked to a Siberian shaman, she let me know being a shaman is tough work. Like you have to go into the underworld and retrieve souls. You have to astrally project as an animal spirit or riding an animal spirit. Same thing, right? To see where the game was. Like if they didn't know where the reindeer were, or where the deer were, they were going to starve. So the shaman, part of the shaman's job was to go into a trance, leave her body either in the form of an animal spirit. In the Ulchi tribe, it was a bear. That was their sacred thing. So there were other spirits. There were wolves and deer that, depending on which spirit came to you and you worked with. But you had to let that animal soul out, project it, and then go find the deer and come back and tell the hunters the deer is over here by the mountain. And then she'd be sick for 3 days. She said every time she did that, she'd go into a trance, leave her body, go down into the underworld, whatever. Also, by the way, in all the werewolf cults, and I talk forever about the different real werewolf cults and their similarities. I cite sources. I am a historian. It's not completely flu stuff. But have tried to apply it. Anyway, if you wake up and you're groggy, you're sick for a couple of days, it takes days. She told me shamans usually don't live very long because it's extremely stressful. So ripping, it makes sense. Ripping, invoking your animal self, i.e. the animal that you are, and imbuing your etheric body, and then sending it out has got to be stressful as all get out. And of course, it's in the witchcraft trial documents, in Slavic documents that I've been now reading and studying, in Roman and in Greek documents, the person who they suspect of being a werewolf is often found in a comatose state. They almost think they're dead. They're barely breathing. Their skin is cold. And when they wake up, it takes them several days to come out of it. I mean, all of these historical ideas, or rather reportings, sort of line up. I mean, this is what got me interested in actually writing a book about it. I'm like, oh my God, this is not just me having a mental breakdown. This is a historical reality. So, and by the way, I recommend highly that you do some research on it if you're interested. So what else can I say? So, I want to end by talking about the animal self, because this is I think what means more to me in practical use. If you want to take all this, I mean, of course, I want you to read my book and go through it. But you have to. The first thing you have to do as an American or as a Western cultural person is get rid of your programming. And I'm talking about Judeo-Christian programming, political programming, I would say maybe Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution programming, all the programming that has made us believe, not just consciously, but unconsciously, that we are separate from the animals. That we not only are separate, but God gave us the animals and the earth to do with as we will. That is absolute heresy in my world, because this is why we are where we are. This is my come to Gaia moment. Okay, so the reason what this experience has taught me in the last 4 years of shape-shifting and going out into the mountains of Washington State and camping out and ripping off my clothes and doing these huge rituals and transforming myself and running amok in the woods in the middle of the night. My vision is 100 times better than it would be. And I've snuck up on animals, on deer and raccoon, and scared the hell out of them. I mean, you literally have access to your genetics that encode all the animals. We are 98% genetically the same as a chimpanzee. We are 85%, 86% the same as a wolf. We have the genetic codes in us, but we believe, and we have been trained, and our parents and parents and parents and their parents and their parents have been trained that no, we are not animals. We are separate from animals, and that animals are beneath us. They do not have feelings. They are simply to be consumed along with the earth. And look where it's gotten us. I mean, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, it was 115 here. Global warming is fast becoming an extinction event. And we have let this happen because somehow we think we are superior and that God is going to take care of it and it's all part of a plan. Any indigenous people you talk to are horrified. They will tell you, and by the way, if you want to read something that will really get you, read the words of Chief Seattle. It's everywhere online. It was his final statement to the white people, and he goes on about how we are, and this was long ago, right? We are destroying the land and destroying the animals, and we don't pay attention, and we don't listen to the animals, and we don't listen to the earth, and we are doomed. The white race is doomed because we are destroying our home. And we're not listening. We're not listening to the animal spirits anymore because we can't, because we have divided ourselves from here, upper cortex, to down to deep unconscious mind. My book talks about unleashing the animal self, i.e. the primordial self that knows and is an animal. I am an animal. I identify. You are too. You are primates. You're a Homo sapien. You are not anything other than an animal. You just have to be particularly clever, and either fortunately or unfortunately, you have the gift of speech. So I go through a lot of exercises of spending a lot of time letting the animal self emerge and suppressing the higher cognitive functions, so that you start to experience. You go out in the woods and you do that, and you work at it really hard, and you do it. You reach a state where you're in an animal state of be here now, animalness, and you can feel the ecosystem. You can communicate with the ecosystem. You can communicate with the animals. It's not anything crazy or weird. It's just something that we have forgotten. Now, the witches knew this, you see. And I'm convinced that one reason that they were persecuted so terribly in the Middle Ages is that this was part of what they were doing. And they were constantly accused of consorting with animals and being animals and turning into animals. And this proved they were against God, because God rules. We are not animals, according to the church. We are above animals. Anyone who consorts with animals is obviously with Satan or the devil, who is, we know is the horn god, the Lord of the Forest, right? Anyway, that pretty much sums up what I had to say. If anybody has any questions, I think I have another 8 minutes left. I could go on, but I don't think I need to. I highly recommend, of course, that you buy, a dozen copies of my book, or at least just one. And I think you'll find it way more interesting than you might think looking at it. One of my jokes with my publisher is, I'm sure the Generation Z and the millennials are buying it. I would like to see more, boomers buying it, because frankly, I think we need it maybe more than they do. But it is my greatest hope that you support animals, and that you support the earth in any way you can. But the best possible way you can do it is by becoming and recognizing and getting into being an animal. Wear the skin of the wolf. Drop that higher function. All it is causing you a lot of worry most of the time anyway. So, does anybody have any questions? I can look at. I think I can look at the feed over here. Anybody have any questions? No? Oh, I have 6 more minutes left. Should I talk about something else? I got lots of things to talk about. I highly recommend the lycanthropy book, and some of the things I recommend, or I sort of show how to do in my book, and it's a modern view of it, is how to set up a shrine for your fetch and how to work with your fetch. And one of the things I lead people through, because the book is essentially a how-to book, most once you get past the oh yeah, the Etruscans. So let me finish my sentence and I'll get to that. You can also use your fetch and dream, which has been the most successful use for me. You go to bed and you visualize, once you are able to project your fetch in the form of a wolf, just like the image of the witch riding the wolf. You can ride it into dream. You can either wear the skin of the wolf or you can become the wolf. And I've had some pretty successful romps as a werewolf in my dream, which were so much fun. Okay, let's see. So what did the Romans steal from the Etruscans? I missed that part. The Romans stole, I prefer sort of absorbed rather than steal, but they did build a lot of their culture on the Etruscans, and there are lots of werewolf gods. The Lord of the Underworld, I'm trying to think if it's Garm. You should have this at the top of my head, but is a wolf god. And in fact, Hecate, this is an interesting one. Hecate, who was a much older god than the Greeks. They're not positive where she came from. Yeah, Hecate is often shown as a three-headed dog. That's much later. She was originally a three-headed wolf, and some historians believe that Cerberus, or however you pronounce it, Cerberus, the three-headed dog of the underworld, was in fact Hecate as a wolf god. There are a lot of wolf gods. Anwen in the Celtic world there's a wolf deity that's there. The Etruscan god of the underworld, their Pluto, yes, somebody's just writing this, was in fact a wolf god as well. It's shocking. When I started as an ancient historian, my master's is ancient history and intercultural communications. When I started doing work on this, I was like, holy moly, like how many wolf gods are there? How many lineages, like entire peoples, were descended from wolves? Sigrid in the famous the ring cycle was born of a wolf. Turks will tell you that the Turkish people came from a blue wolf. If you start looking around and just look up about lineages and who their totems were. My dog, I went and bought my dog from a Native. I didn't realize she was a Native American woman down in Tacoma. She had a huge wolf paw tattoo on her neck. And I said, is that a wolf paw? And I thought, okay, I'm in the right place. She also had, she had a huge wolf statue, a wooden wolf statue near the door. I'm like, okay, I'm really in the right place. And she said, yes, it's the totem of my tribe. And so even especially here in Native American cultures in the Northwest, the indigenous peoples venerate wolves, and there's I just saw a statue of a wolf, and the wolf is pulling itself open and a human's coming out. I saw this at a casino, the Tualapas Casino, and I'm like, that is shapeshifting. So I don't want to be accused of any kind of cultural appropriation. It's not my place to say, but we know that this wolf, the sacred wolf, the great wolf spirit, as I call it, and I work with, is across the board. So let's see. Do we have any more? Let's see. We have 3 wolf packs in Northern California. Yes, you do. I'm very happy. I belong to a lot of wolf, conservation groups. Some of the money I get from my book, I give to these things. And yes, in the Northwest here in Washington, we have I think 4 fledgling wolf packs. So yeah, don't start me on Idaho. Yeah, don't start me on Idaho either. Yeah, or Montana right now. But we're going to do what we can. The more, here's the thing: if animals are deity forms that we work with, then the more wolves there are, the more access we have to that egregore, to that spiritual force, right? We can talk about esoteric deity here, I'm talking about a being that's really alive. I'm talking about a spiritual egregore that is there and of the earth. So I think I'm just about done. Does anybody have a final question before I have to sign off? Again, if you want to get a hold of me or you want to see the full notes for this, just go to werewolfmagick.com. I hope I spelled that right. No, I didn't. werewolfmagick.com. Anyway, thank you so much. Oh, I had a great time.
Awesome, Denny. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. I love it.
Absolutely wonderful. So, yeah, very readable book. I strongly recommend his book.
Thank you. Not as weird as it sounds, but or maybe, I don't know.
No, it's good. So, okay, and you're gonna have a new one coming out too soon.
I am Werewolf Magick for groups. I'm calling it behind at Pagan conferences. I'm calling it. It's the Shapeshifter's Grimoire or the Shapeshifter's Book of Shadows. It's a werewolf book of shadows. It's for groups that want to work this current, but almost in a coven-like manner. It's very fun. One of the things that we strive to do in this is not use language in our invocations. We use what I call werelingo, howling, yipping. That helps you get into the animal space and to shapeshift. So,
wow, Denny, thank you again. So
thank you for having me.
I'm gonna leave us to break for 15 minutes. Denny, if you want to join a table,
sure.
I suggest a big table in case a lot of people want to talk with you. And I'm going to turn this back to the lobby. All right.
Thank you, everybody. I'm getting lots of nice comments here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful day.